And welcome back to our panel discussion, Contextual Intelligence, Deciphering Disparate Data in Government, sponsored by Mark Logic here on federalnewsradio.com and Federal News Radio 1500 AM. Our guests today are Dave Rost, the subject matter expert on insider threats at Mark Logic, Gary Duno, the Director of Analysis at the National Geospatial Intelligence Agency, Stephen Buckner is the Assistant Director for Communications at the Census Bureau, and Neil Wiley is the Deputy Director for Analysis at the Defense Intelligence Agency. And I want to talk about the tools and techniques you're using for that data analytics, data analysis, moving up a level from the database and the layers that we talked about earlier. And so give us an idea, Stephen, if you will, we'll start with you, on the types of tools, the classes of tools that are becoming important for looking at this non-relational and various types of data that are mixed up together in one big new style database.
Sure. So from a federal statistical standpoint, we have a lot of statistical analysis tools that are looking at the data and the quality of that data, and that's where a lot of our analysts spend a bunch of their time. And it used to be that it was limited to reports and paper and all sorts of things. That is evolving. So if there's a way that you can incorporate new tools, whether it be text analytics or business intelligence and data visualization tools that allow the analyst to make some quick findings in terms of where there may be some outliers in terms of the data that's coming in, they may be able to then mine through that data a lot faster to find out what the data are really telling us. And I think that applies not just in our business, but probably also in the intelligence business. So anything that helps sift through all the amount of data that we have and present some kind of finding faster, then it's a more efficient process. So we have our largest survey, the American Community Survey, produces over 11 billion estimates every year. 11 billion. That's a huge amount of data. So our analysts are going through that constantly to say, okay, is that data of the quality that the Census Bureau is able to put out at very low levels of geography, because it drives so much information down at the local levels. And so they use a lot of those techniques. From a census communication standpoint, we're using different tools, mostly business intelligence visualization tools, to pull in the disparate sources using some APIs from existing collections of whether it be web analytics or call center analytics or email analytics, different systems, but pulling it in one platform and then actually providing a layer of business intelligence visualizations on top of it to where real time we can see what's going on with the American public in terms of their interactions with us. And then we take that to then develop products. One of the examples I like using is that mining through analytics gives you some important information. The population clock on census.gov is actually one of the most accessed pages on our website. People would come to it, look for the information, and find it quickly, but then they'd leave. They wouldn't do anything else. That's called a bounce rate. And through that learning and through the analytics, we said, well, we're missing an opportunity because they're coming to look for a single number, but is there other information they may be interested in for whatever they're looking for? So we actually went through a quick development cycle and put out a new population clock that will allow the American public to go through and actually explore the population. So now we've incorporated how the population changes over time, births, deaths, and component of change like migration. So now they see a little bit of behind the scenes of how that estimate is calculated. But then they can go back over time because we have the data and see at any point in time what the population was, or mine down into their local areas while also serving up some non-population data at the same time. So we've enriched that experience, and what we've done through the analytics, we've been able to measure that the user actually likes it more. So they spend more time on that page, they don't bounce off of it, and then they also do referrals onto the rest of the census.gov. So what does that mean? It means they're learning a little bit more about the information they're doing and wanting to jump off into different points. So that's just from a communication standpoint, from a web standpoint, the way we enrich that customer experience for somebody just based on the interactions. But we would have never known that had we stayed to our paper charts rather than looking at it from an analytic and visualization standpoint.
And it keeps people off Zappos wasting money too, so while they're on the Census Bureau site. But I'm wondering, for your own analysts, the way you described it, are they like furniture makers that have a whole array, a shop full of tools that they use for each little dig and corner, or do you have some kind of a unified environment for doing data analytics?
I think that's a great point. I think through the leadership of our CIO and CTO, they're really trying to push for standardization. Everybody likes their own products, and so trying to look at a standardization around the data analytics, the tools that we're using for analysis and things like that, brings it back into, again, where we're working as one organization and one enterprise rather than separate silos, to where we can now have the same version of the software and tool and be able to communicate amongst each other. And I would assume that as we go more and more, people are learning to understand and mine through data visually. And I think that's been the biggest change. We used to produce this thing called the Statistical Abstract, which was a great book. Over 114 years, I think we produced it.
I was a regular reader.
We don't produce it anymore. Why? Because the information is now available to everybody through the web. And so it just shows you how things change from a table to now people are looking at different types of charts and different types of data arrays and different kind of visualizations to learn different things rather than having to plow through and look for that cell. But we just still have users that like that, so we have to compromise there.
Well, the data you're gathering and putting online today, in 114 years, will someone be able to use it and see it?
That's an important part. How do we keep all that historical data, because it is a treasure trove of information about how America is changing over time, and we're changing daily. And so the importance of statistics is that the public or business community needs to know where are we going. But to know that, we have to know where we've been. And that's sort of the beauty of statistics is we gather the data and the information. We have to make it more readily accessible to where people can find the information they're looking for to be able to make those judgments. And hopefully we're doing a good enough job to store that information in a way that people can do it. Used to be you had to go to a library to get it. You don't have to do that anymore. You can pretty much go to census.gov and pull it up pretty quick.
All right, and Neil, at the DIA, describe the data analytics environment, the types of tools you have, not specific one by one, but the types of tools you're using and how they're contributing to this unification of data and its use.
So right now we have a number of data analytic tools of varying degrees of sophistication. But they tend to work within their own individual data sets. And they tend now to be focused largely on ascertaining relationships and patterns. So in other words, if we see a particular pattern of activity of a unit, we can sort through an awful lot of collected data and try to determine whether the same activity occurs the same time of day, occurs every Tuesday, it's utterly random, which almost nothing is, and to allow the analyst to see pattern and association that the analyst might not otherwise have been able to generate themselves. Similarly, we have a number of analytic tools that allow us to understand the interrelations of networks, whether that's a command and control structure for a military or a terrorist organization or whatever. So not only to see and understand it, but also to visualize it, as Stephen said. We do a lot of work now through analytic visualization. But again, within, at present, most of these tools tend to work within discrete data sets. Where we need to go is to allow these data analytic tools or whatever follows from them to work across different types of data, structured and unstructured data, to be able to make connections, see patterns, relationships that run across different data types that may be there now, but that may be very hard to unpick. Also in the future, I think we look for data analytics that spot trends and predict outcomes, rather than simply allowing us to see what has been, to take what has been and allow us to project what will be. And that's, I think, the future direction of data analytics, to me, at least in the all-source world, is to be able to look for comparisons and trends across multiple data sets and then to start looking at predictive analysis.
Gary, does that describe the analytical environment at the NGA?
It's very similar. As I mentioned, we're working this across the intelligence community together as disparate agencies towards one objective end state. So we're looking at things like spatial temporal analysis, data visualization, graph analytics that allow our analysts, just like Neil's, to identify patterns and trends, and also anomalies, things that we wouldn't have thought to have looked for before. I think one important aspect of the tool discussion is, as stewards of the taxpayers' dollars, we're always looking at the most efficient and effective way to use those dollars. And often that leads to the ever elusive search for a corporate solution to things. And because of the disparity of the missions, the different kinds of approaches we need to take to solve intelligence problems, it's almost impossible to find a corporate solution to everything that we're trying to do. It's a global mission with different people looking at things different ways. And so there are aspects of our architecture that can be enterprise solutions, but we need to have the flexibility to be able to allow analysts to look at things differently and apply different tools. And so what we're trying to do is develop some visualization tools, some front-end viewers that allow people to look at things differently depending on how they want to look at the data to answer questions about their problem. And also another key aspect for us is, and Neil alluded to this a little bit, is all our analysts have models in their heads about how they look at an intelligence problem. Those models, if captured through software or another tool, will allow us to apply data differently than we do right now and make the analyst even more effective than they are right now because they're spending the time running through that model in their head and thinking about how to apply the data. If we can do that virtually, it'll allow them more time to look at the problem.
All right. So, Dave, are we in danger of having unification of databases and data sources, but chaos or, the Wild West at the tool level?
No, I don't think we are in danger of that. I think it's because the way that we can structure the data, and if we maintain that data provenance, pedigree, and time span validity, that it is key that you can just use any application that you want on top of the data. But it's not just enough to put the data from these silos into a data layer. You need to do enrichment on it. You need to make sure it's properly cataloged in a metadata catalog so that you can get access to the data. You need to make that all searchable. And you also need to do, what MarkLogic refers to as semantic enrichment, where essentially we're helping you get the who, what, when, where, why of your data through semantic analysis. A good example of that is where, Dave Ross lives in Annapolis. Well, the database already knows that Annapolis is located in Maryland. So the database will automatically make the assertion for you that says Dave Ross lives in Maryland. And that's really beneficial for when you ask questions of that data where you can start figuring out, okay, show me everybody that lives in Maryland. Well, in a traditional database, I wouldn't have shown up at that point because I didn't live in Maryland according to the database. Similarly, you need to be able to store data in multiple ways. When you're looking at an airport, for example, well, an airport is traditionally now stored, or not now, but was stored as a single point. Well, an airport's not a single point, it's a polygon of points. And that all needs to be stored in the database as well, so then applications can use that data effectively.
And so I guess the follow-on question there is, if you've got this unification of the tools and you've got the unification of the databases, how does that all play against the cloud computing initiative and the database, the data center architectures that seem to be changing also?
Yeah, cloud is a very important initiative where we're reducing the resources required to run your enterprise. It allows you to, scale up and scale down architecture as needed. If you have operations going on when the Census Bureau goes on, 24-hour operations, they're going to need a lot more hardware behind it, but you can scale up and down in the cloud environment. Long as it's securely accessed applications, the data is properly tagged, cloud environment is a perfect environment for an enterprise data layer.
So, Gary, what is the NGA's approach to cloud architecture? With the understanding you may not use commercial clouds to put the prize jewels in.
Right. So we're making significant investment in cloud now in order to enable all the technology and processes and the data standards that I spoke about earlier. So we're looking at all domains that we work on, so from the unclassified to the most highly classified domains, establishing together with our intelligence community partners cloud architectures that allow us to use the data at rest, tools at rest, and just go grab them when we need them.
So it's like a domain-specific cloud, but it's still within the ownership and firewall of the NGA.
Yes.
And Steve, it's Census. What's the cloud strategy, and how does that relate to this unification of data analytics that we've been talking about?
I think our CIO has done a good job laying out a phased approach to moving more and more to the cloud. At the Census Bureau, we have to protect the information that we collect from the American public and the business community, or we lose that trust. And if we lose that trust, we won't be able to collect those important information that we're gathering. So we're not able to share that information, but we also go to great lengths to make sure we protect the data whether it's public data or not. So moving to the cloud, we have to ensure the security and integrity of that data. So I think a structured way that is being approached now allows us to start ramping up as we approach the big decennial census in 2020, because if you think about the magnitude of that operation, it's the largest thing the federal government does. We have to count probably 320 million people living across 130, 140 million housing units at the same time. So whether it's cloud and the infrastructure around the collection device or the storage of that information, we have to take very seriously and map that out to make sure we don't betray the Americans' public trust that they put within the Census Bureau. Mm-hmm.
Hey, Tom, I just wanted to point out that one of the things we can't forget about with cloud is the importance of the search engine capability. So a lot of our analysts, Neil mentioned earlier, looking for data all over the place. And now they have to use multiple search engines to go different places to look at things. So we need to have search engine capability that is capable of leveraging cloud so our analysts can go in one time but have access to all the data no matter where it resides. So that's a critical thing to remember.
Yeah, I think we view the transition to a cloud environment as absolutely essential to enable the kind of cross data analytics that we need to do to retain our relevance and utility, as an analytics service in the future, to be able to really make sense out of that data. Has to happen. There is going to be some challenges, though, for all of our organizations, in determining what legacy data migrates to the cloud and what doesn't, because there's a cost associated with doing that. So, part of the cloud migration strategy will actually, entail deciding what you leave behind.
Yeah, all right. So, Dave, we'll ask you the last question then. What's this all going to look like in about 5 years? And we'll give you 30 seconds.
Well, if I could predict the future, I see users being able to log in through a single interface that's not on a laptop. They can use it on a laptop, a phone, an iPad, or whatever device you want to use. Be able to run your search across the entire database and get that data back in a very fast manner. I'm talking millisecond manners, where not minutes for your queries. But you can do precision results. And when you get those results back, you can make use of that data.
Right, making use of data in a precision way. Good way to end the panel discussion. I want to thank our guests today, Neil Wiley, the Deputy Director for Analysis at the Defense Intelligence Agency, Stephen Buckner, the Assistant Director for Communications at the Census Bureau. Gary Duno is the Director of Analysis at the National Geospatial Intelligence Agency, and Dave Ross, the Subject Matter Expert on Insider Threats at MarkLogic. I'm Tom Temin, federalnewsradio.com and 1500 AM.
On behalf of MarkLogic, thank you for joining our discussion. We'll have the archive from this session available shortly, and a link will be sent to you to share with your colleagues. Those of you who requested a training certificate will receive an email with download instructions immediately following the webinar. This concludes today's webinar, and thank you.